Thank you for turning to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a couple of swords that I really enjoy out of the Dungeon Master Guide. They're the Sword of Sharpness and, more importantly, the Vorpal Sword. Either one of these can be a big deal in your campaign, and the Vorpal Sword in particular could be the source of a long quest for a player to get their hands on it. So today we're going to take a look at both those swords, why they're really good swords, and how they can skew your campaign pretty easily. So today on page 121 from the DMG, Sword of Sharpness and Vorpal Swords. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that I'm still doing a subscription drive. Over half my views, well over half my views, come from non-subscribers. You guys have been great in responding. I want to thank everybody who's subscribed, but I'm still trying to build a channel, so if you can help me out, that'd be great. Also, Patreon. I have a number of patrons already. Thank you guys very much for the support of the channel, but always trying to grow that to help grow the equipment. But back to the topic at hand, Dungeon Master's Guide, Sword of Sharpness and Vorpal Sword. I'm putting these two together because they are actually brought out together in the descriptions. So we're going to start first with the Sword of Sharpness. Let me go ahead and zoom in on that a little bit. There we are. It's a weapon. It's a weapon that is treated as a +3 or better for purposes of who or what it can hit, even though it only gets +1 bonus to hit and damage. That was very confusing for us back in the day because we thought it meant that it was +3. What they mean to say is there are certain creatures that can only be hit by +2 or greater or +3 or greater weapons, +4 or greater, and so on. Even though this is only a +1 weapon, it is treated as being +3 for what it can hit. That's a confusing distinction. I wish they'd made it a little clearer, but that is what it means. So, it gets only +1 to bonus to hit and damage. Its power is great, however, on a very high roll to hit. It will sever an extremity, arm, leg, neck, tail, tentacle, whatever, determined by the random dice roll, and then we have here the chart on how you do it. So if it's a normal armored opponent, it would sever a 19 through a 21. So what this means is you would have to show an 18 natural becomes a modified 19, or 19 becomes a 20, or 20 becomes a 21. So there's a 15% chance of severing a limb on an ordinary creature. So if you're facing a guy and he's in plate armor and you roll an 18 or greater, you sever a limb. We roll randomly for which limb is severed, and we do allow the head to be one of them. So on a human, it's right leg, right arm, right leg, left leg, head. So 1 for the right arm, 2 for the left arm, 3 for the right leg, 4 for the left leg, 5 for the head, and 6s would roll over. That's how we do it at our table. Again, you have to roll the requisite numbers. So an 18, 19, or 20 on a normal-sized opponent. Larger than man size, so you're facing a frost giant, and you want to cut a limb off of him, you would have to roll a natural 19 plus the +1 becomes a 20, or a natural 20, so a 10% chance. Keep in mind, DMs, this means that your big bad evil guy, who is normal size, has a 15% chance of dropping right away. And then your giant has a 10% chance. And then solid metal or stone, this would be some kind of earth elemental, that kind of creature. You would need a natural 20 to sever a limb, resulting in 21. Sword of Sharpness responds to its wielder's desire with respect to the light it sheds. None a 5-foot circle radius, 15-foot, or 30-foot radius equal to a light spell. This is one of the few swords, and the default in the AD&D system is that swords and daggers shed light. We found that inconvenient in our campaign because you really couldn't sneak up on anybody with your weapon drawn. So we changed that rule that only ones that expressly call out what light they shed actually shed light, such as a Sword of Sharpness. So this would shed light in our campaign. Sword of Sharpness is absolutely worth giving. And again, for a man-sized creature, you have a 15% chance of pretty much instant defeat. Now we go to the Vorpal Sword. This guy's nasty. So on a Vorpal Sword, it's similar but superior to a Sword of Sharpness. a Vorpal Sword is +3 to hit and for damage bonus. When a score on the to hit die shown below is made, it will sever the head, neck of its opponent. So a normal sized guy will lose his head on a 20 through 23. Keeping in mind, that's on the natural die roll +3. So that would be a 17 plus 3 is 20, 18 plus 3 is 21, 19 plus 3 is 22, and 20 plus 3 is 23. So you would be taking a head off a normal human armored opponent 20% of the time. That's a 1 in 5. So for every 5 of these guys you square off with your weapon, you have a chance of decapitating one of them. That's a huge power swing. So be careful when you give out the Vorpal Sword. I mean, either one of these swords you should use caution. But the Vorpal Sword should definitely be an item that's gotten from some vast epic quest or a dragon's hoard after a really long campaign. This shouldn't just be handed out casually. For one thing, it's a +3 sword. For another thing, it can end a fight 20% of the time in one swing. Now we go to the larger than man-sized, which is a 21 through 23. So you would need to roll a natural 18. So 18, 19, or 20 would result in a 21, 22, 23, because you're only considering the +3 to hit from the sword. Again, there goes your giant. 15% of the time, your giant's head is just going to leap from its shoulders. And solid metal or stone is going to be 22 to 23. So to be a natural 19 plus 3 is 22, and natural 20 plus 3 is 23. You only consider, of course, the sword's bonus of +3. And then it has a DM will note that there are many creatures that cannot suffer decapitation due to lack of mobility, mutability, or form. Due to a lack of a head, it means to say, or mutability of form. There are also certain creatures that may have heads that will not necessarily be killed by decapitation, such as doppelgangers, elementals, and golems. And I agree with that. One other thing I put in the category, any dragon adult or greater cannot be subject to a Vorpal Sword in our campaign. You just don't want to lose your big dragon and the epic fight to one lucky swing. And in my opinion, they're just too big. I know there's an argument to be made that a dragon's neck is long and sinewy and rather thin for its size, etc. I don't care, they're dragons. Half the game's named for them. I give them a break as regards to Vorpal Swords. So you can use a Vorpal Sword, and anytime in our campaign that you throw a natural 20, you double the weapon damage. So if the weapon does 1 die 8, you throw it. You throw a 5 on a die 8, that becomes 10. Now you add all your pluses on top of that. So you get a bonus for getting a 20 in our game. And of course, with either of these swords, you would get the ability of the sword as well. I just don't give it on dragons or anything like that. You're not going to cut the head off a titan in my game with a Vorpal Sword. Or just some things in the game that would not be subject to either one of these blades' special powers. So again, a word of caution, the Sword of Sharpness doesn't seem like much. It's only a +1 weapon. But again, 15% of the time against an ordinary opponent, it's going to end the fight with one swing. And a Vorpal Sword, 20% of the time, is going to do the same thing. So I recommend caution on both of these guys. You don't really want to hand these out willy-nilly. You certainly don't want multiple Vorpal Swords sitting around your table. Keep in mind, too, with weapon specialization, for instance, if I have a fighter who's double specialized and he's 7th level, he's getting 2 swings around with that Vorpal Sword. This Vorpal Sword has an expected 20% chance that it's going to cut a head off at each swing, which means every 2.5 rounds, you can reasonably expect a head to be removed by this sword in the hands of a 7th level fighter with double specialization. Beyond that, the double specialization gives him +3/+3. The sword gives him +3/+3. Even if he has no strength bonus, that's a formidable +6/+6 with the 20% chance of removing a head. So, and you run the same thing with the Sword of Sharpness. It's only a +1, but again, you have a 15% chance, roughly 1 in 6 chance of removing a head every time it's swung. So with the fighter 2 shots around, every 3 rounds, he should, not a head, I'm sorry, a limb. Every 3 rounds, the fighter should be expected to remove a limb. So again, I exercise caution with these blades. I've given out many of both. I've given out probably more Vorpal Swords than I should admit to, but I've also been DMing for 42 years. In my younger days, Vorpal Swords came out reasonably often. As I've gotten older and more mature about it, no, I don't. I don't give out Vorpal Swords nearly like I used to. They are literal game changers. You've got to be careful. Quick word about the word Vorpal. That comes from, I believe it's Alice's Ventures Through the Looking Glass. When in the poem The Jabberwock, Snickersnack went the Vorpal Sword. That's where the word Vorpal comes from. It's a nonsense word that was made up for that poem. I believe it's Alice's Adventures Through the Looking Glass, not Alice in Wonderland, that the Jabberwock appears. So that's it for today from page 121. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and saw. If you did, please like and subscribe. Remember the Patreon if you would. And I'll see you next time on page 121.